Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. And as you may note, I am wearing the white scarf of irredeemable chutzpah. Yeah, here it is. Because let me tell you, if there was ever a situation in which the white scarf of irredeemable chutzpah is applicable, this is it. I have to read an article to you, and then we can chat about it for a bit. But oh my goodness, get ready. Brace yourselves, because a team of computer scientists and musicologists have completed Beethoven's 10th Symphony. That's quite a feat, because the work only exists in some sketches, and in fact can never have even been said to have been begun, let alone completed. I mean, the fact that Beethoven made sketches means absolutely nothing. We have no idea just what would have happened to them, and until he sat down and actually wrote something called Zehnte Symphonia, or whatever he was going to call it, 10th Symphony, he didn't start. He was just making sketches. I mean, when I write my academic papers, when I wrote one of my big pieces on vibrato, for example, I did tons of research. I had piles and piles of articles. I sketched out some notes. I had some thoughts. I made an outline. But I didn't start writing the damn thing until I actually sat down, gave it a title, and started. Beethoven never started. So you can't finish what has never been started. Let's just begin with that sensible premise. Second of all, as you may know, there is a single movement Beethoven's 10th out there. It was completed or assembled by Barry Cooper, the noted Beethoven scholar who did a terrific edition of the Beethoven piano sonatas. That was been recorded a couple times. Wynn Morris did it, and Walter Weller did it on Chandos. It consists of an adagio in E-flat major, coupled to a quick sonata movement in C minor, E-flat major being the relative major of C minor, in case you're following our journeys through various keys. And it sounds, well, what is there to be said for it? The opening slow introduction part has a main tune that sounds an awful lot like the principal theme of Liszt's Les Preludes. You know, da 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 dum bum 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 bum. It sounds like that, and then there's this fast movement, and then the slow bit comes back. So it kind of does a little bit like what Schubert's Ninth, the first movement of that, does. Is it convincing as Beethoven? We'll never know. I mean, I would say no, it isn't. But does it sound kind of like Beethoven? Well, we'll get into some of these issues in a moment. But first, we need to get into the details of this absolutely fantabulous article here, which appears on the website The Conversation, which is subtitled Academic Rigor, Journalistic Flair. Yay! That's what we all want, isn't it? It's in the Arts and Culture section, which comes right after the COVID-19 section. I guess they're somehow related. And the subtitle is How a Team of Musicologists and Computer Scientists Completed Beethoven's Unfinished, Should Be Unbegun, 10th Symphony. So, the article is written by, wait a minute, let's see who wrote it, because we should know. I believe it's someone on the computer science team. Yes, it's Ahmed El Gamal, professor and director of the Art and AI Lab at Rutgers University. I mean, there is an art and AI lab, which is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And let me just say straight out that I have no problem with trying to get artificial intelligence to write pastiche Beethoven or Mozart or Janacek or anybody. I think that would be fascinating to see if computers can churn out reams of this stuff, because it questions everything we believe about the unique personality of works of art and their reproducibility. And I think that's a thrilling field to be in. I really do. I wish I could be doing it. And an amazing field of study. So that's all great. That's all great. The issue is not what they can get the AI to do and what this represents in terms of the advancement of the interaction between artificial intelligence and the arts. Not at all. What the problem is calling it Beethoven's 10th, first of all, since he never started it. And the other problem is, and this is really a real issue for me, what musicologists are doing. Because you may recall we had this discussion with respect to a certain other German composer whose works seem to be metastasizing in multiple editions. You know the guy, Bruckner. Oh, yeah. But with Beethoven, it's a different situation. A slightly different situation, because hitherto, although people have tried to complete the 10th from sketches, and also there's a bit of like the 6th piano concerto, and there are some other little completions bopping around, basically people are a little careful before they mess with Beethoven, which I think is a good thing. Well, it was a good thing. Now it isn't. So, here's the article. Get ready. When Ludwig von Beethoven died in 1827, he was 3 years removed from the completion of the Ninth, a work heralded by many as his magnum opus. He had started work on his 10th symphony, but due to deteriorating health, wasn't able to make much headway. All he left behind were some musical sketches. Well, that's not started work, but again, that's my view of it. Ever since then, Beethoven fans and musicologists have puzzled and lamented over what could have been. I never have. I couldn't care less. I think we've got enough Beethoven, so there. His notes teased at some magnificent reward. Not really, albeit one that seemed forever out of reach. And so it remains. Now, thanks to the work of a team of music historians, musicologists, composers, and computer scientists, Beethoven's vision will come to life. White scarf of irredeemable hubris, folks. I mean, what an absurd claim. It's a ridiculous claim. Anyway, the author continues. I presided over the artificial intelligence side of the project, leading a group of scientists at the creative AI startup Playform AI that taught a machine both Beethoven's entire body of work and his creative process. It taught the machine Beethoven's creative process. Do I detect a little bit of puffery? You know, it's sort of like, Geritol cures tired blood, right? Remember that? Yeah, okay. I'm beginning to feel a little bit of snake oil is being sold here. A full recording of Beethoven's 10th Symphony is set to be released on October 9th, 2021, the same day as the world premiere performance scheduled to take place in Bonn, Germany, the culmination of a 2-year-plus effort. Okay, here's the next section. Past attempts hit a wall, it's called. Around 1817, the Royal Philharmonic Society in London commissioned Beethoven to write the 9th and 10th symphonies, written for an orchestra. Symphonies often contain 4 movements, in case you didn't know. The first is performed at a fast tempo, the second at a slower one, the third at a medium or fast tempo, and the last at a fast tempo. Of course, that's just the opposite of what Beethoven did in the 9th, where the goes fast, fast, slow, fast. But again, why worry about such things? Beethoven completed the 9th in 1824, which concludes with the timeless Ode to Joy. But when it came to the 10th Symphony, Beethoven didn't leave much behind, other than some musical notes and a handful of ideas he had jotted down. Exactly. He hadn't begun to write the symphony, folks. There have been some past attempts to reconstruct parts of Beethoven's 10th Symphony. Most famously, in 1988, musicologist Barry Cooper ventured to complete the first and second movements. He wove together 250 bars of music from the sketches to create what was, in his view, a production of the first movement that was faithful to Beethoven's vision. Well, no, that's not exactly what he did, but that's another question too. Yet the sparseness of Beethoven's sketches made it impossible for symphony experts to go beyond the first movement. Yes, and I remember as a member of the American Union of Symphony Experts, just how often we discussed that and how difficult that was, of course. Assembling the team. Here we go. Get ready. In early 2019, Dr. Matthias Röder, director of the Karajan Institute. Who even knew there was a Karajan Institute? I'm sure it has lots of money to throw at these people to do these absurd projects. That's why they do them. They get free trips. They get snacks. Maybe they get paid. Holy crap. An organization in Salzburg, Austria that promotes music technology contacted me. He explained that he was putting together a team to complete Beethoven's 10th Symphony in celebration of the composer's 250th birthday. Aware of my work on AI-generated art, he wanted to know if AI would be able to help fill in the blanks left by Beethoven. Well, there are nothing but blanks. The whole discussion is off on the wrong foot, and I'm very sorry, Doctor. I'm sure you're a wonderful scientist, but this is not true to the facts, and that's a real problem. The challenge seemed daunting. To pull it off, AI, artificial intelligence, would need to do something it had never done before, but I said I would give it a shot. Ritter then compiled a team that included Austrian composer Walter Wertzova, famous for writing Intel's signature bong jingle. Wertzova was tasked with putting together a new kind of composition that would integrate what Beethoven left behind with what the AI would generate. Mark Gotham, a computational music expert, led the effort to transcribe Beethoven's sketches and process the entire body of work so the AI could be properly trained. The team also included Robert Levin! Robert Levin! Oh my God, Robert Levin, you should be so ashamed of yourself, the white scarf of hubris. Were you lured in by the free trip to Salzburg or the promise of snacks? I mean, seriously, did a bag of chips in a hotel suite convince you to get into this? I'm horrified. A musicologist at Harvard University who also happens to be an incredible pianist. Levin had previously finished a number of incomplete 18th century works by Mozart and Johann Sebastian Bach. Oh my God. Well, my respect for Robert Levin has just plummeted. Anyway, the project takes shape. In June 2019, the group gathered for a 2-day workshop at Harvard's Music Library in a large room with a piano, of course, a blackboard, and a stack of Beethoven sketchbooks spanning most of his known works. We talked about how fragments could be turned into a complete piece of music and how AI could help solve this puzzle while remaining faithful to Beethoven's process and vision. Again, solve the puzzle. There is no puzzle to be solved. There is no puzzle. There are just some sketches. It's not a puzzle. There's nothing to lead us to believe that those sketches would ever have amounted to something called the 10th Symphony. Nothing at all. Just keep that in mind. The music experts in the room were eager to learn more about the sort of music AI had created in the past. I told them how AI had successfully generated music in the style of Bach. Okay, I guess success is a relative term. However, that was only a harmonization of an inputted melody, an inputted melody that sounded like Bach. It didn't come close to what we needed to do, constructing an entire symphony from a handful of phrases. Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, the scientists in the room, myself included, wanted to learn about what sorts of materials were available and how the experts envisioned using them to complete the symphony. The task at hand eventually crystallized. We would need to use notes and completed compositions from Beethoven's entire body of work, along with the available sketches from the 10th Symphony, to create something that Beethoven himself might have written. This was a tremendous challenge. No shit. We didn't have a machine that could feed sketches to, push a button, and have it spit out a symphony. Most AI available at the time couldn't continue an uncompleted piece of music beyond a few additional seconds. We would need to push the boundaries of what creative AI could do by teaching the machine Beethoven's creative process. Here's that term again. Teaching Beethoven's creative process. Oh, God. How he would take a few bars of music and painstakingly develop them into stirring symphonies, quartets, and sonatas, piecing together Beethoven's creative process. This is fascinating. I didn't know a creative process came in pieces. I guess it does. Who knew? As the project progressed, the human side and the machine side of the collaboration evolved. Wertzova, Gotham, Levin, and Ritter deciphered and transcribed the sketches from the 10th Symphony, trying to understand Beethoven's intentions. That's quite a chore, given the fact that they don't reveal any. Using his completed symphonies as a template. Here we go. They attempted to piece together the puzzle of where the fragments of sketches should go, which movement, which part of the movement. They had to make decisions, like determining whether a sketch indicated the starting point of a scherzo, which is a very lively part of the symphony, typically in the third movement, not in the case of the ninth. It's the second movement. Or they might determine that a line of music was likely the basis of a fugue, which is a melody created by interweaving parts that all echo a central theme. Well, this at this point is, as you can tell, nothing but the barest speculation by committee, which is the worst kind of speculation, actually. The AI side of the project, my side, found itself grappling with a range of challenging tasks. First and most fundamentally, we needed to figure out how to take a short phrase, or even just a motive, and use it to develop a longer, more complicated musical structure, just as Beethoven would have done. For example, the machine had to learn how Beethoven constructed the Fifth Symphony out of a basic four-note motive. Well, actually, he didn't really do that, but that's another issue, isn't it? Next, because the continuation of a phrase also needs to follow a certain musical form, whether it's a scherzo, trio, or fugue, the AI needed to learn Beethoven's process for developing those forms. Well, in the case of the scherzo, that's not true. It's just ABA. Or if it has a repeated trio, it's ABAB. A. What's to learn Beethoven's creative process, right? You just have an ABA form. And in the case of a fugue, well, this is an interesting question, isn't it? Because Beethoven's fugues are a special subject all by themselves. If you follow the exact rules of what a fugue is supposed to be, you aren't going to get a Beethoven fugue. So it would be quite interesting. And I would really like to know how they even know that the alleged 10th Symphony was even going to include a fugue. That would be an interesting piece of information. What sketch jumped out at them and said, aha, gotta be a fugue. Yeah, it's gotta be a fugue. And more to the point, and this is an interesting question, I think. If, for example, if we had not known who had written the Grosse Fuge, would anybody have accepted it as a work by Beethoven? Seriously? If a computer churned out the Grosse Fuge, would we accept it as a work by Beethoven? This is an interesting issue, isn't it? Because the genius part of Beethoven's compositions, because Beethoven, unlike Bach, Beethoven was an evolutionary artist. Everything was different. Who could have predicted from the Eighth Symphony what Beethoven would have done in the Ninth? How would we all know? How would anybody know? It's impossible to tell. And not only that, the things that are unique about the next work, which we consider to be strokes of genius, we only consider to be strokes of genius because Beethoven wrote them. We give him the benefit of the doubt until maybe we settle in and figure out what he's doing or how it all works. But it isn't obvious. And if a computer does it, if UNIVAC 62A3 does it, why would we give UNIVAC the credit of, the benefit of the doubt? We never would. We never would. We would have just said it's some aberration of computer programming. We would not say it's a stroke of Beethoven's creative genius, would we? So how would it be possible for us to acknowledge the things that this gadget does that are different from what Beethoven did previously as unique strokes of Beethoven's creative process? And frankly, if we have a bunch of musicologists like Robert Levin telling us that that's true, he should be, whatever they do to musical people, disbarred, de-PhD'd. That's just outrageous. It's completely outrageous. But, okay. I'm sure they've thought about all these things. I'm sure they have. So let's continue. The to-do list grew. We had to teach the AI how to take a melodic line and harmonize it. The AI needed to learn how to bring two sections of music together. And we realized the AI had to be able to compose a coda. Holy shit, a coda! Which is a segment that brings a section of a piece of music to its conclusion. Oh yes, the coda. Finally, once we had a full composition, the AI was going to have to figure out how to orchestrate it, which involves assigning different instruments for different parts. And it had to pull off these tasks in the way Beethoven might do so. Here's another interesting question. How is the AI going to learn how to orchestrate like a deaf guy? That's a really interesting question because Beethoven's orchestration is not good orchestration. It's not textbook orchestration. I mean, even Barry Cooper, when he did his version of the 10th, his orchestration is a hell of a lot clearer than Beethoven's would have been, probably. Beethoven's orchestration is full of oddities of balance and sometimes unique strokes of tone color, which are very unconventional, but which may have been the result of his deafness or his own inner creative genius. But either way, it requires an enormous amount of cleaning up to do properly. Nobody plays the 9th the way Beethoven wrote it. I mean, nobody. Not even if you follow the Urtext edition, you still have to make countless decisions about balances and weighting and blending of chords and all of that stuff that is completely unique to Beethoven. And I bet you anything that those musicologists and those AI people are never going to be able to come up with a true Beethovenian orchestration, because most of its most miraculous qualities, or many of them, consist of errors, mistakes, things that are only worked out in performance, things that Beethoven either did intentionally because he didn't care and he knew he wanted to, stick it to the violins in this passage, or because it was worked out in rehearsal. So that's a whole nother question. Learning to orchestrate a la Beethoven. I mean, what does that mean? Oh my goodness. So, passing the first big test. In November 2019, the team met in person again, this time in Bonn at the Beethoven House Museum, where the composer was born and raised. See, someone is paying for this. Someone is spending money to fly these people around and house them and feed them so that they can have their meeting. And I am telling you, I mean, who wouldn't say no, Mr. Levin? Oh, look, a free trip to Bonn. Let's go. Let's have a good time. Only the best restaurants. Only the finest accommodations. Of course, be treated like a VIP because you're finishing the mighty 10th Symphony of Beethoven. Hell, no expense is too small. The meeting was the litmus test for determining whether AI could complete this project. We printed musical scores that had been developed by AI and built off the sketches from Beethoven's 10th. A pianist performed in a small concert hall in the museum before a group of journalists, music scholars, and Beethoven experts. We challenged the audience to determine where Beethoven's phrases ended and where the AI extrapolation began. They couldn't. So, that doesn't mean anything. I guess if you're an AI person, it may. And again, I don't denigrate the AI achievement in being able to continue a musical phrase. That's maybe a big deal. And okay. A few days later, one of these AI-generated scores was played by a string quartet in a news conference. Only those who intimately knew Beethoven's sketches for the 10th Symphony could determine when the AI-generated parts came in. The success of these tests told us we were on the right track, but these were just a couple of minutes of music. There was still much more work to do. Ready for the world. Here we go. At every point, Beethoven's genius loomed, looming, challenging us to do better. As the project evolved, the AI did as well. Over the ensuing 18 months, we constructed and orchestrated 2 entire movements of more than 20 minutes apiece. Oh my God. See, there's a case. Beethoven never wrote anything that had 2 movements of more than 20 minutes apiece. So that's the question then. Has the AI gone berserk, or is it a genuine outcome of having been taught Beethoven's creative process? I don't suppose we'll ever know, will we? We anticipate some pushback to this work. Of course, those who will say that the arts should be off limits from AI and that AI has no business trying to replicate the human creative process. I have no issue with either of those things. That's not what I'm pushing back against. What I'm pushing back against is the idea that this is a completion of Beethoven's 10th Symphony. It may be a miracle of AI, and I think that AI may indeed have some utility in this business of completing incomplete fragments, if there's enough there to complete. But again, right now, they're not even completing a fragment. They're completing a nothing. They're completing some sketches, which they're calling Beethoven's 10th. That doesn't mean that it has anything to do with what would have been Beethoven's 10th. If they wanted to say, listen, if they wanted to say, we have a computer program that can spit out Beethoven, we fed into it the sketches of the 10th Symphony to see what would come out. Let's listen to this and see if it sounds like Beethoven. And if it did, well, then great. Of course, if it did sound like Beethoven, it could only sound like Beethoven because it sounded like what Beethoven did previously. It could not, by definition, sound like what Beethoven might have done successively I mean, think about it this way. Beethoven's symphonies up to the ninth came in pairs, right? 5 and 6 were written as a pair. 7 and 8 were written as a pair. Was the 10th going to be a pair, part of a pair? And in that case, what would it have been? Would it have been another choral symphony? What would the text have been? Ach du lieber Augustin? I mean, what would it have been? Would it have been Goethe's Erlkönig? Who knows? How could AI extrapolate Beethoven's creative process to choose a poetic text to set to music? How could musicologists do it? How could anybody do it, or anything? I mean, we don't know the answer to any of these questions. And two instrumental music, 20 movements, 20 minutes long each? Each? How long is this sucker? Holy cow. All right. Okay, so yet when it comes to the arts, I see AI not as a replacement, but as a tool, one that opens doors for artists to express themselves in new ways. Okay, fine, fair and good. This process would not have been possible without the expertise of human historians and musicians. It took an immense amount of work and, yes, creative thinking to accomplish this goal. At one point, one of the music experts on the team said that the AI reminded him of an eager music student who practices every day, learns, and becomes better and better. I'm so happy for the music expert. Now that student, having taken the baton from Beethoven, oh, why say these things? Just why say these things? It's outrageous, is ready to present the 10th Symphony to the world. And then they give you a sample, which you can listen to. It's a scherzo. Clearly, it's a scherzo and trio. It's 3 and a bit minutes long, and it's based on the 4-note motive from Beethoven's Fifth. So clearly, the AI learned something. It learned something from Beethoven's Fifth and other works of Beethoven that use that same motive. Well, evidently, this one does too. And who the hell knows whether it has anything to do with what would have been the 10th Symphony. Actually, musicology has long told us that Beethoven's Gratulations Minuet, the minuet of congratulations, that late thing, was actually supposed to be the minuet / scherzo of the new symphony. Because remember, Beethoven actually didn't always stick to writing scherzi. Sometimes he went back to the old minuet, as he did in the 8th Symphony. Maybe he would have done that again. Why even assume that a piece of a sketch would have been the motto or the motive for a scherzo? Could be the symphony wasn't going to have one. Who knows what Beethoven would have done? I mean, in just assuming that it was going to be a 4-movement symphony, you're already off the beaten path, because Beethoven wrote 5-movement symphonies. The pastoral is in 5. And the late quartets follow no standard formal scheme at all, except for the last one. They have a whole slew of extra movements and things like that. So, it would have been interesting had that been carried over into the symphonic realm. I don't know. We don't know. We can't know. Obviously, we can't know. So to squish these sketches into the framework of a 4-movement symphony, you're already behind the 8 ball. You're already on the wrong track, because Beethoven's genius did not automatically assume that he was going to pour the sketches into a pre-existing mold. He really didn't. So it'll be very interesting. I look forward to hearing this farrago of nonsense. I really do. I'm going to be fascinated. I hope, and I'm sure it will, sound like all kinds of Beethoven that we've heard before. But one thing we know it isn't going to sound like, it's not going to sound like what Beethoven would have done had he lived to compose his 10th Symphony. So, that is that. And as I hope you agree, I'm going to post the link to this thing in the description of this video, so that you can go and see the article and hear the sample. It's been posted in various places as well besides the conversation. It's on the Smithsonian website and some other places. They're going to make a big hoo-ha about it because they probably have money behind them to promote this thing, and everyone's going to get behind it. They're all going to talk and blah 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 blah, and what no one is going to do is actually listen. Least of all Mr. Robert Levin. Oh, you particularly get the white scarf of irredeemable chutzpah. Shame on you. Shame on you for being associated with this foolishness. Okay, that's just me. That's my pushback. Keep on listening, folks. Good luck with Beethoven's 10th. Take care.